6 starts out with Robin, Dustin, Erica, and Steve walking down, having just witnessed the machine trying to reopen up the Upside Down. And Steve and Dustin end up filling them in as to what that machine is exactly. But as they're walking down, they realize that the Russian that Steve took out is now alerting his comrades that there are intruders. So they quickly have to get the hell out of there. They start frantically running through a series of doors, and eventually Steve Harrington and Robin hold them off as Dustin and Erica get away, but the Russians do end up picking up Robin and Steve. Dustin and Erica now have to find a way out of the lab, but also they need to get Steve Harrington and Robin back. And those two are currently being interrogated by the head Russian commander. The Russians do not believe that they are just teenagers working in an ice cream shop, and they start to torture them, trying to get answers out of them. Eventually, Robin confides in Steve that she sat directly behind him in a class 2 days a week for an entire year, and he had no idea that she even existed. She even goes as far as to say she was obsessed with Steve Harrington, but he just had no idea who the hell she was. When the Russians get back into the room, they give them truth serum, and the answer still is, we're teenagers who work for Scoops Ahoy. But Robin does reveal that we cracked your code, you're not as smart as you think you are. 2 teenagers who work in the mall realize what you guys were doing here. Steve also lets them know who Dustin is and his home address, so they have all that information. Now, speaking of Dustin, he's located a bunch of that acid stuff that corroded the floor, and Erica has located a cattle prodder, and they're going to use these 2 items to try to free Steve and Robin. So as Steve and Robin are being interrogated, an alarm goes off, and when the Russians run out of the room, part of the hallway has been corroded. And that's when Dustin and Erica come in and free Steve and Robin. Now, before we get to the one Russian that got away, it's 4th of July and the mayor is getting ready to do that big party that he was throwing Hawkins. The issue that he has is that Terminator Russian guy has shown up, and he wants Jim Hopper's head. He gives the mayor 1 day to find Jim Hopper, and even though the mayor says, look, he can't be that hard to find, he's driving a yellow car for Christ's sake, the Russian Terminator does not want excuses, he wants results. And Hopper, of course, is at the investigative journalist's house trying to figure out how to get this Russian that they kidnapped to speak. After trying to play good cop with him and getting him Slurpees and food, Hopper has enough. He roughs him up a little bit and finally throws him out of the room and throws the keys at him and says, if you want to leave, leave. When he re-enters the house, the investigative journalist and Joyce are looking at him like, dude, are you nuts? He's just going to run off. And he goes, look, I know what this guy's going to do. He's going to realize that he has it better off with us because when he goes back to those Russians, they're going to assume that he talked anyway. So he's going to come back to us, and he's going to help us out. Now, at first, it doesn't look like that's going to happen as the guy ends up uncuffing himself, jumping into the car, and seemingly pulling away. But he does stop, backs the car up, and agrees to help them. And it plays out just like Hopper said. What he reveals is that all the houses they're buying up is stealing the power grid from the power plant to try to help the Russians get into the Upside Down. They tried it in Russia, but it didn't work. Because even though they have the machine to do it, location is another issue. And because the gate was already open in Hawkins, if they want to open the gate, that's exactly where they had to go. Now, initially, Joyce freaks out and wants to make sure her kids are okay. And after that, they call a hotline that Dr. Owens gave them. And it's a really weird hotline. It's a government-type situation where when they answer, they say, Philadelphia Public Library, and you have to use a code name and a password to get your message across. And they tell Dr. Owens, come to Hawkins, Indiana. The Russians are trying to open the gate. Bring as many people as you can. And Hopper hangs up. But Joyce is not going to wait around. She calls the guy back and reams him out like she's at a PTA meeting, telling him that he needs to get off his ass, go find Dr. Owens, and alert him to what's going on in Hawkins, Indiana. And then just hangs up. Real power move by Joyce. But the Russians aren't the only issue in Hawkins because the Mind Flayer has trapped Nancy in a room, and it looks like the Mind Flayer is going to get Nancy, but at the last second, Eleven busts through the door and literally throws it out of a window where it retreats down into the sewers. They all go back to Hopper's cabin, and Eleven is trying to locate the base. She's trying to locate Heather, her dad, Billy, the whole gang, but she's having problems. While all this is going on, Mike gets worried about her because she's never done this for this long of a period of time. Max ends up sticking up for Eleven, saying, look, she knows her limitations. You don't have to speak for her. This fight results in Mike admitting that he doesn't want to lose her and that he loves Eleven. Just after he says this, Eleven walks out and says, I think I found them. So Eleven's idea is to do what she did with her mother. Go into the sunken place and literally touch Billy and try to get some kind of message. Mike says, keep in mind, your mother wanted you to see. And Billy might not. so this could be a dangerous plan. But 11 goes through it anyway. When she touches Billy in the upside down, Billy grabs her, and when she goes to get her hand back, she ends up tripping into a memory of Billy as a kid as he surfs with his mother on the beach. Billy's having a great time, he looks happy, but the memory gets darker and darker and darker. You find out that Billy's mom literally abandoned him with his abusive father. She couldn't take the abuse anymore and just left the family. This really is the heart of the issue with Billy and why he's so angry all the time. It caused Billy to fight as a kid and just be an overall dick. But during this memory, she is able to figure out that the steel mill is where they are located. 11 thinks she's out of the sunken place, but none of her friends are in the basement. And that's when Billy shows up. He says, you opened this up, you let us in, and now you're gonna be forced to let us stay. And now we're all coming for you, and we're gonna take over you, and then we're gonna take over your friends, and then we're gonna take over everybody. And when Billy says this, you see all these people in Hawkins just walking towards the abandoned steel mill in like a vegetative state. They start forming a line, single file, to the basement of the steel mill, and literally start getting absorbed by the mind flare. With each person, the mind flare grows and gets bigger. So the mind flare is ready to bust out and attack Hawkins. Eventually, 11 does end up coming out of it, and she is once again crying in Mike's arms. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Please consider subscribing to the channel. If you do not see the next video up in one of the end screens, not to worry, it'll be up in the next couple days. But the most important thing is that you like and subscribe and all that good stuff.